Hey everybody, it's just go ahead. I didn't mean to steal that from you, but hello everybody and welcome to Tavern Talks. Chuck and I are on tonight, even if you can't see Chuck, and we have our illustrious guest, which is Crit Hit the Giant, otherwise known as our new friend Sean. Sean, if you want to introduce yourself, either way.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm online as Crit Hit the Giant. You can find me on like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I don't know how I would describe myself in this space other than just like I'm a RPG enthusiast. I have a website and YouTube channel where I talk about things that just kind of interest me, excite me about things with Dungeons and Dragons and all tabletop role playing game stuff. I mean, yeah, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, people have asked me, like, what do you do, or how, or anything like that. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a guy with a camera, just doing shit, right?
It's almost like you're playing pretend, which is a core tenet of the hobby.
So, but yeah, that's me.
How we go. No, that's great. So, for those of you who have been here before, you know how this rolls. We have our guest. We run through a couple of questions, and then we just kind of go down rabbit holes as we as we see fit. Honestly, but we do typically start out with a couple of standard questions. One of which being, Sean, Crit Hit, whichever one you want to go by, just tell me. We will go for it anyway. When did you actually get first introduced to D&D or TTRPGs in general?
Yeah. So in November of 2022, I was like laying in bed at like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't fall asleep. And I was like, maybe there's just like a movie or TV show that I might want to watch I haven't like heard about, or something new, like just kind of seeing what else is out there, and trying to find something that I haven't seen before. And a trailer pops up for this show called The Legend of Vox Machina, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I watched the first episode and like I was completely hooked. I was like, this show is amazing. It's funny, it's hilarious, it's really really cool, right? From that point, it's just been kind of like a snowball effect where then I'm like, well, who created this? And learn, it's a group called Critical Role that's been around for like 8 years, and they play Dungeons and Dragons every week and they stream it, and so it's just kind of fell into that. I know a lot of people discover Critical Role through their actual play. I kind of discovered them in a different avenue with their animated series, right? And it just kind of went from there. So 2023, I was kind of in this space where I had a podcast about comics I was doing with my really good friend, and we were just getting to a point where it's like we just couldn't sustain and keep doing it anymore. And I was just like, I think I was done like talking about comics and anything with that in general anyways, just because I was just kind of reaching my max capacity of what I was interested in and everything. And so I was like, I really want to get into role-playing games, because one of the things I liked about doing the comics podcast is I got to talk to people about what they enjoy and all that. I got to talk to like the artists for books and writers and things like that. But ever since like from college as an adult, I never really had like a really good like creative outlet or space to really just kind of get creative and do crazy shit that I really enjoy, right? Because I was in high school, I was like in show choir, I was in theater, did that in college, and just really enjoyed like doing kind of like performances and stuff like that. So when I started learning about role-playing games and started playing Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonbane and Candela Obscura, Pathfinder, all that stuff, it just gave me that creative outlet of I can create a character and create a whole story and like live in this character's persona, and like that gave me that creative outlet to be able to do that. So Legend of Vox Machina is how I started, and the more I learned about Critical Role and Dungeons and Dragons, like I just absolutely fell in love with it. I technically played Dungeons and Dragons a couple times at my wife's family reunion because her brother and cousins have played it and they needed somebody to stand in. I just kind of I just had them tell me what to do, and I just rolled the dice and did all that stuff. But when I, discovered Critical Role, I was like, oh, there's like the acting and like role playing part of it. Like this is how you can do that sort of thing, right? And so I didn't really think about it as being a role play game, just more of a, like the role playing aspect of it, just more of like you're playing a character type of thing. So getting into tabletop role playing games was just something that was like a breath of fresh air for me, that allowed me to have that opportunity to kind of do something that I feel like I was like something was missing a little bit, right? I wanted to be able to, I think, express myself in a way that I haven't before, and tabletop role playing games have been able to do that because I can get creative. I can tell stories without having to be like a writer, like coming up with a novel or comic or something like that. Like that always intimidated me. But I was like, if we're sitting around telling stories, like I love telling stories. In fact, my wife has told me one of the reasons why she fell in love with me was because I would tell these hilarious stories that made her laugh and all that, right? So I'm somebody that just enjoys telling stories, and this allowed me to do that sort of thing. And I wish I fell into this a lot sooner, because I felt like I missed like 20 years of playing games where I could be telling stories. So, but technically, my first game I ever played technically was D&D. But when I discovered Critical Role and started getting into it, the first game I think I played after that was actually Pathfinder. I played a couple one shots. Didn't really click for me at first. And then when I went to Gen Con, I actually played Candela Obscura. And I absolutely love that. I'm not somebody that loves paranormal or horror, but that was such a fun game. It was just so great. And then that led to me reaching out to my game store, my local game store, to find out, do people play tabletop role-playing games? Do they get together? And then that's how I connected with some other people. And I played in my first campaign, which was actually Dragonbane. And and so that led to me actually forming some like really close friendships with people from that table. A buddy of mine that lives like a couple hours away that we met online as well too, he was getting interested in D&D the same time I was, and we found the online Dungeons and Dragons campaign that we played in, and we did that together for about a year and a half. And so it's just been a lot of fun, and it's kind of more. I don't want to get too far ahead with the question and all that, but it just kind of came into when I first started. I was like, I love playing it. I don't think I would ever want to be like a dungeon master because it's so intimidating. And then circumstances kind of pushed me into that, and I'm like, okay, I really love the dungeon mastering part of it as much as being a player too. So
yeah, so I mean, I think you've kind of answered almost every question that we needed to ask up front.
Yeah,
I'm quite honestly, because I mean, you touched on what kept you playing, because it's essentially the role play aspect of it and being able to be the storyteller, which is great. I mean, no matter which of the TTRPGs you're playing, being able to role play those characters and build those stories is definitely the fun aspect of it all.
Mm-hmm.
But would you mind actually like defining that moment that made you want to switch from being a player to actually DMing?
I will tell you what made me go into dungeon mastering. Let me say that way. Like it wasn't so much I wanted to take the leap. It was more of a opportunities presented itself, and I just needed to, right? And so what I mean by that is, shortly after I started getting into Critical Role and Legend of Vox Machina, I would tell my son, who was 8 or 9 at the time, about these stories. Wouldn't let him watch it because it was not kid appropriate at all whatsoever. But I would kind of, tell him like, who Grog is and who Pike is and Vax. I think he would love Vax because of, him being a rogue and everything like that. Like my kid loves to do, tricky, sneaky things all the time. And so he said, I want to try to play Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, oh, that's great. I had just started getting into it. So I'm like, I don't know like how to run the game because I'm still learning it. I was like, but maybe we can find somebody that can that's running a kids table. And so we went to our game store, and sure enough, there was somebody that was running it. And so we got them like connected to it, and it was so great because that first session after I picked him up, I was like, so how'd it go? He's like, oh, it was awesome. I was an Eric Cochra like fighter, and I got to fly and like swing my sword around, stuff like that. Like he absolutely loved this. I was like, oh, it's awesome. A year goes by, and the dungeon master just had a lot of things going on, like in terms of just life stuff, right? Like this is what happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so, like they would go like months without like playing a session. My kid really wanted to like play D&D like more regularly. And so I said, well, what if I try to run a D&D game at our game store with some other kids that might be interested in it, because I would love to bring kids in to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, I haven't been a dungeon master, but I felt like, you know, with kids, it's probably a little bit easier and a lot more forgiving than if I try to do it for adults. And so I was like, what if I ran it for you and some other kids? He was like, yeah, that's great. So I reached out to my game store and we set something up, and we, you know, connected with like 5 random kids that we never met before. But like that was last year. We spent a whole year playing D&D. We did Lost Mine of Phandelver, and they had a complete blast. Okay. Around the same time that my kid wanted to, when I offered my kid to run a table for him and some other kids at a game store, a group of friends of mine that I've also met online, you know, I would talk to them about, you know, my recent obsession with D&D and tabletop role-playing games, and like, you know, how I don't have a problem whatsoever, as you can see in my background here. They had started saying like, you know, we actually have always been interested in D&D, but we just never knew like where to start or, you know, how to find a game and all that. So I was like, you know what? I'm learning how to be a dungeon master for my kid. Why don't I try to run the game for you guys? Just run the same campaign. And they're like, yeah, that's awesome. And so we've been doing that for about a year and a half, and it's been a blast running it for them. There's a lot of shenanigans that comes from that table that I absolutely love, from both tables really, but my friends group is just, it's really funny, and I look forward to Tuesday nights because I never know what to expect from them. And it's nice, and it's kind of fun to like compare like what they've been doing in Lost Mine of Phandelver and what my kids have done. And I would tell them, you know, after they completed that scene that my kids have already done, I would tell them like what they did. And sometimes they're like, oh my God, those kids are so smart. We didn't even think about that. So, but yeah, so that's what kind of pushed me into Dungeon Master. Was more of like, I was feeling in a necessity because I wanted to bring people into the hobby and give them that experience. And I just had like, it was really stressful at first because I was trying to learn like how to do this, and like I didn't know where to start. There's so much, like I had to get the rules, I had to get the DMG and the monster manual and everything, and bought the Lost Mine of Phandelver book and tried to figure this out as we go. But you know, like a few months in, like that's why I ran Lost Mine of Phandelver, is because I wanted like structure to follow, so that way I can like worry about just how to run the game and not, you know, coming up with the story at the same time as well too. After a few months, like I started getting a little bit more comfortable in that space, and then I started thinking about, oh, what can I do with what the characters are doing, or pulling their stories or their backstory into Lost Mine of Phandelver, even though, you know, it's a module. I just never thought about like having those certain aspects to kind of fill in. And it was just like I've had to step into both of their games that was not in the module, that ended up just being like wonderful and great, and just, you know, chaotic and brought like really great epic moments and stuff like that. So that creative side of me, of coming up with new ways that connects specifically my players' characters into the story, that is unique, that you can play Lost Mine of Phandelver and you can still get like, you still know the story, but you still get like a different experience from it. It was a lot of fun to do that. So it started out as a necessity. I didn't think I was ready, but if I didn't do it, like who would for my kid? And now, you know, we're doing our second campaign with the same kids. We're doing Daggerheart this time because when that came out, I ran a one shot for the kids and they absolutely loved it. So they asked to switch over. So we're doing Daggerheart. My kid and the other kids as well too. I let them vote like what campaign frame they wanted to do, and they voted on Age of Umbra.
Nice.
My kid loves Matt Mercer. Like, he is a huge fan of Matt. He said that, you know, he's inspired him to be a dungeon master. We went to C2E2 to meet him with doing a photo op and autograph. And my kid is a talker, but when he had his photo with Matt, when he walked away, like he was literally speechless. So it was a really Cloud9 moment for me and for him to like have that kind of come full circle for him to be able to actually interact with Matt in that way. So
that's good.
Yeah, so I told him like, hey, Matt Mercer wrote Age of Umbra. He's like, we're doing it. I was like, well, we got to ask the other kids at the table, but like, you know, I had them vote, and actually the majority of them wanted to do Age of Umbra. So
great.
Yeah, and then I've been pulling in the adversaries that Matt has used in his Age of Umber series and pulled it into their games. I've also used some of the monsters from their Tal'Dorei Reborn from D&D and just kind of like took the idea of that monster and then took an existing stat block from a critical, or I'm sorry, from a Dagger Heart adversary block and just kind of reskinned it essentially. And I would tell my kid, like, this is straight from Critical Role of Matt Mercer. He's like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, he just loves having that small little connection with, the guy that has really inspired him to be a dungeon master. So,
that really harkens back to a Netflix documentary I watched some time ago, and it was one called The Toys That Made Us. And they had specials on G.I. Joe, Transformers, Star Wars, and it was very specifically in the Kenner Star Wars section where they talked about how obsession with action figures really stems from creating a connection. Like, we may never get to fly an X-Wing, but if you have a little X-Wing pilot in your pocket all the time, it helps you to feel like there's that connection to the universe that you love and the thing that you want to do. So I think it's frankly incredible that you have that bond now with your child who's just as much as obsessed with this new hobby as you are. And you really came into dungeon mastering or game mastering, since you're spreading yourself outside of Dungeons and Dragons, the way that very many of us have, and a very similar story in that it seemed intimidating until you realized it's a game. It's a shared storytelling experience, and all the rules are just there to help adjudicate things, but you can absolutely change what's written to suit the needs of the table, etc. So what's wonderful is you had such a unique story you just shared with us across all of those anecdotes, but at the same time, it's so like ubiquitous. It's so like this is what everybody else has gone through. Just the details are different, and it is really heartwarming that whether it was 50 years ago with the inception of D&D or all the way up until now when we have literally hundreds of games to choose from, it's almost agonizing thinking that in a single lifetime you might not get to all of them that you want to try. That people are still having this same experience finding the hobby, and that's frankly awesome. I'm glad for you and your kid.
Thank you. Yeah. We bonded really hard with that. Like, we talk about all of our games. We talk about, the Critical Role stories. We've been listening to the Reslayer's Take, which is, a podcast that is under the Beacon, brand and everything, that's done by, I forget the name of the group. But it's, it's in the world of Exandria, and they play D&D. But using that kind of theme of the Slayer's Take and everything. And so we've been listening to that and absolutely loves it. He loves hearing, those stories as well too. But yeah, that's something that we just kind of really connected with. We played a lot of one-on-one D&D games, and his favorite thing to do is to play a druid that has the animal sanctuary, and he goes out and tries to find different animals to like save and protect and all that. And so I always come up with like these, like crazy fun wild animals that he can go save. For a while it was a lot of mystical creatures, so it's like an owlbear, but this owlbear can also like go invisible or something like that, so kind of like that little aspect of like they're magical in some way. And we did that so often that I actually ended up creating a character for a D&D game that I play, where it's kind of centered around that idea of a character who is kind of commissioned to protect magical and mystical creatures. And that was really something where it's just like I created this character because I think it's a lot of fun, but I also had that connection with my son that way, because I'm always thinking about him when I'm playing this character and that whole background. And every time that I play a D&D character, I try to incorporate my kid in there somehow, either by their name or some other thing that they would recognize if they ever read the story or anything like that. So just like you said, with the action figures, you definitely have that bond with those characters, but that's also something that has created that bond with my kid and I that has expanded out to the games that I run without him or play without him, that still kind of connects us in that way.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I know James has a story that he likes to talk about with his boys, because he printed out like some custom sheets that are just like very simple D&D character sheets. Yeah. And it was his 11-year-old, and I think the other one is 6, and they really don't get along too well that often. But they actually cooperated for 4 hours.
Yeah.
To build terrain using Legos and, just play this game that he had intended to only be like an hour long.
Right.
So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's good. It's good for that.
Yeah.
I've also gotten my kid into it as well. We're actually playing Shadow Dark at home.
Oh, I've heard
James's
great
house.
things about it. I haven't played it yet, but I've heard so many good
Love
things
it.
about it.
So
Yeah.
good. So much fun.
Yeah,
we've got a gang of like 8 of us playing it.
Yeah. Talking about like kids arguing with each other, then when they play, role-playing games and all that, same thing happens with my kid and his cousins because they're around the same age, and there have been times where they're like just constantly fight that has driven like my wife and her sister nuts. But I started offering to run D&D for both of my nephews because they both had an interest in playing D&D, and every time that I would run D&D for them, like they always got along, my kid and the 2 cousins. So it's something about D&D that allows them to actually cooperate and not fight with each other. Yeah, it's just amazing. Like my wife is just like, this has been great. Like I can actually talk to my sister without stressing out. Like the boys are going to be at each other's throat because you're running D&D and they're all playing together and having fun and everything. So yeah, so it's really interesting how that can have the effect with young kids.
And not for nothing.
I really like it.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I was gonna say I really like it for my daughter because she's naturally like really shy.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to use it as a method of like her being able to get out and express herself a little bit more, even if it is just like a group of people that she knows. Because we ran into an instance where her character was the only one who understood the creature's language. So we had to use her to figure out what was being said. And she was looking at us, like asking questions to us, and like, no, you actually have to talk to Mr. James. You have to talk to him and get the answers from him, not us. So
that's Dungeon Master magic right there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe had to coach her a little bit, but
right.
Okay.
What's funny is I remember I was at a local state gaming convention, and my kid and I sat down at a kids D&D one shot that somebody was running. And so it was like kids and parents. We sat down at a table, and a girl about probably 10 years old maybe, joins the table, and she's very sweet and polite, kind of shy as well too, like what you were saying with your daughter. And we introduced each other's characters, and it got to her. And with like a very like not high pitch, but like, like that girl kind of voice, like sweet voice.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, my character is Penelope and she is a knight. And if anybody says that cereal is just soup candy, then they will take off their head.
That's fair.
I know. I was just like, like she said it very nonchalantly, very calm. And I'm just like, I don't know to laugh or be terrified or both at this, but it was just hysterical. I was just not expecting that. I was busting laughing, I think, for a good minute because I was just not expecting that. But it was fantastic. It was just great, like how she already thought about this and already came up with like some sort of pet peeve that would cause her character to just kill somebody, apparently, for calling cereal soup candy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sam, you were trying to say something a little while ago?
Oh, nothing of significant import. There was a little while there where all the social media avenues were promoting like, hey, consider learning game mastery and like table running and world building as a means of like therapy for groups. And I was doing a little bit of research into that to see if it was an avenue worth pursuing as a side gig in the spare time that I have, that is diminishing more and more and more as time goes on, the more games I run. But as I was doing my research, it turns out that in a lot of penitentiaries, they play Dungeons and Dragons, and it genuinely is a means of fostering like habilitative cooperation between inmates. And there are a lot of like really positive results for persons who lean into and really embrace the game, because it genuinely fosters a sense of cooperation and provides agency they wouldn't otherwise have. And then, of course, they have some stand-up comedians who've seen similar research, because now, similarly on social media, if I see stand-up comedy these days, it's usually something to do or another with either D&D or another TTRPG. But it's just kind of like, yeah, what if you role played like a heist scenario, but it was like a prison breakout, and you used that as a means of like staging your prison plan? It was like, that's a terrible way of like poking holes in this wonderful thing. But circling back around to the positive, it genuinely is the case. I don't have statistics readily in front of me, and I want to stay focused on the conversation. But it proved to be of benefit for persons who were incarcerated to be playing TTRPGs together, because it genuinely taught them skills with reference to how to work with people, how to solve problems very clearly with their words, because the vast majority of D&D is played like as we speak with each other. So not whether it's in that situation or if it's learning how to dungeon master for the first time, if it's helping kids to come out of their shell or just to figure out who they are,
Right.
etc. These games are very much a certain sort of magic that I absolutely love.
Right. Oh yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that about the D&D penitentiaries. That's really cool.
Yeah. You got to imagine it's not a thing in every prison, but the ones that have allowed for it, that then contribute to the study information, it's impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I bet. It makes sense too, though. Like it because it's escaping realism, right? Which allows us to be able to kind of live vicariously through, some sort of reality that can help us like cope with things in real life, right? And so it's, I mean, definitely. Like I've heard people talk about all the time that how D&D is just their cheaper therapy session and all that, but I mean it really is for a lot of people,
cheaper.
So yeah.
That's not inexpensive, sir.
I guess it depends on who's running it, right?
Player versus DM, yeah, that
right,
usually is the case too.
Right, yeah.
No, I digress. Well, you've brought up a lot of interesting things, and it sounded like from one of your stories, as you became more comfortable with running the game, you started to toy with the idea of tampering with the written story to suit the needs of the players at your table, and that's always one step shy of straight up homebrew, whether it's the story, if it's any items. So just to pique my curiosity, you're for all I know less than 2 years into the hobby, since it was 2023, and that could have been any month, but you're 2 years in. Have you really toyed with homebrew, and if so, what's your favorite thing that you've created, either because it worked really well or it horribly failed?
Yeah, so in terms of, I guess, like purely homebrew, there's always some element homebrew, right? Like if it's something that you have created or adjusted, like take something existing and like, change it to add like some sort of element, like that's homebrew, right? Because you're changing something to make a different thing from it.
Yeah.
In terms of homebrew, I would say like Daggerheart right now is very much a homebrew campaign because they don't have a formal adventure. Now, Chris Perkins had announced that that's something he's working on since he's joined the team. So I was like, yes, that's what I would love to have to run the game, because I just don't feel comfortable yet to completely do homebrew. And like that's Daggerheart style, right? It's just like let the narrative, take you wherever. When you're running with a game with kids, like it could really go in so many different directions that, like, literally when we did the one shot, I would tell them like, all right, these are like the tallest trees you've ever seen. I was like, so what else do you notice about these trees? Because they encourage you to do like, collaborative story building and all that. And so I asked the kids like, so what else do you notice about the trees? And I don't know if this kid like wasn't paying attention or just messing with me or what, but it was like, these trees, I think, are like probably the shortest trees I've seen. And I'm like, all right, so this is like the tallest short trees you guys ever see. I'm just like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that, right? Like,
well,
love it.
If you ask me, that means this character has such an impressive history that these might be the tallest trees that some of the others in the group have ever seen, but by no means are they the tallest ones that kid has seen.
See, that's much better than me coming up with like short, tall. Like this is why I hate the improvising part sometimes. Like I can improvise like in the moment sometimes with certain aspects. I can't improvise a 2-hour session with these kids. At least I don't feel like. And so Daggerheart is very much a improvisation, completely homebrew. I'm definitely out of my element. It's been going fine so far. The kids have actually been really loving it. Tonight we did there's a deck called RPG Campfire Cards where you can ask questions and answer them. So I asked the kids if they wanted to do that today, where we could take like the first part of the session where I ask them a question, they answer that in their character, and they absolutely loved it, right? But it's just it's just totally out of my element. I don't feel like as confident with it, but the kids are loving it, so that's really good. It, I love Daggerheart as a player. I am not loving it as a GM, and it's just more because it's not my style. Like it's a very
Right.
well written game, and I absolutely think it's a very wonderful game overall. And I have very I have issues with it, but it's very minute versus the great things about it as well too. But it's just not my GM style at all whatsoever. But going back to the idea of homebrew, um, at my friend's table, I decided one day I was like, I'm just going to kind of lean into the chaos a little bit, and I did a couple of things where I introduced a character, just a random character in Stonehill Inn, where they didn't have like a name or anything like that. I think I just wanted to like fill in the place a little bit, but I guess the picture I picked for this guy was like very attractive because all of a sudden like somebody wanted to go and chat him up, and so I had to be like, he's just known as the Dark Stranger. He doesn't tell you his name because I don't have a story for this guy, and now he's like just because it's hysterical because this character has caused rifts because a couple players like I don't trust this guy at all, and the girls are just like, this guy's totally fine, like what is your deal, so I had a lot of fun just kind of stowing in like seeds of doubt. And I had the next day I had the stranger kind of leave early in the morning, but he left a +1 sword for the guy that was like really suspicious of him. Yeah, and so it's just fascinating. Like I didn't really plan on doing like a homebrew character, but it just became such a pivotal like focus point for the group in that session. I was like, okay, I got to do something with this guy now, right? Like not in Lost Mine of Phandelver whatsoever. I did the same thing where they're heading towards Cragmaw Castle, and on the way, a traveler with a wagon just happens to come by, and he is known as like a magic item traveling merchant. Again, some of them were really suspicious. Some of them was just like, oh, let's get some magic items, honestly, I just pull it in. I didn't know where that was going necessarily, right? But I was just like, I could do a scene for that. I can't do a whole session for that, but I can do a scene with that. I gave them some magic item options that they could have. They all got some really cool magic items. One of them ended up being cursed. The guy who got the cursed item absolutely loved it, and he's like leaning into it so hard to the point where like he is trying to use it to his advantage for like not just like combat but like role play and all that. Like he's leaning into that role play aspect of it so much as well too. Like he's been fantastic with that. So I don't think like the cursed item that was handed out could have gone to a better person, because he is just loving the crap out of that. But those are some of the things that I've been homebrewing. And then for my table, we're talking about our next campaign. And I gave them some options of like modules that I have and everything like that. And they all picked a campaign that is like an anthology of adventures. So it's not one that's like written as a campaign, but it's just a series of adventures that you can kind of tie in as a campaign if you want that to be a thing and all that. So we're going to do that. But I also listened to a lot of Sly Flourish about DM stuff, which has been like phenomenal and just so helpful in so many ways. That he had this idea that he puts out called like a 3-2-1 thing, where you offer like 3 quests, and then once they complete 1 quest, you offer them the remaining 2, and then once they take that quest, then you kind of throw out the last one and you kind of do like 3 more, right? I'm not adapting that like wholeheartedly, but what I am doing is going to take like 2 adventures and offer my party they can pick a quest. But I think the third one is I'm going to try to maybe just create a quest as a complete homebrew thing of like ideas that I've had, as a way to kind of creep into playing with, how does homebrew like would work? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses I need to like improve on? What are some things that I need to think about moving forward? So that way, because I feel like, scaling up, this is a really good way to do it, is to create a quest on this kind of campaign that you can focus on that single thing without having to come up with a whole story that ties into it, and you can work on those and experience that, and then you can pull those in for another game and eventually create a campaign for another table using those things. But also, I'm hoping it gives me more of a confidence to be like, okay, the next campaign we're running after this, homebrew could be a really good option for us because I feel pretty confident in being able to do that now, right? So that's what I'm hoping to do for this next campaign.
You talk about being able to do stuff on the fly. Shadow Dark is really good for that because the handbook actually has tables just to roll on, and you can just come up with a
Yes.
whole like dungeon on the fly. Even the
Yeah.
monster personalities on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've been on the receiving end of that at our home game.
Yeah, I love the spell mishaps in that. I've actually adapted that into my D&D games as well too with spell scrolls. Like if they don't succeed in casting it, they have to make an intelligence saving throw. If they fail that, then there's a mishap that happens. And I borrowed a lot of it. I didn't borrow all of it because there's some that's like you can't cast a spell for like a week or something like that. I was like, that's a little extreme.
Be pretty tough.
And
Yeah,
and that doesn't affect everybody
Yeah.
the same way. Like if the barbarian got that, if the barbarian's like, well, that's great. I don't fucking care. I don't cast
Oh,
spells,
no.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I know the way spells work in Shadow Dark. I mean, if they fail to cast, just generally fail to cast, they can't use it for the rest of until a long rest.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
if you
I heard
do
about
have
that.
and that's, but I mean, if you pass all your spell checks for like healing or magic missile, you can use it all day long.
Right.
That one time that you mess it up, if you get a critical fail, then there's that mishap.
Right.
If you're a cleric and you do that, you piss off your deity. You have to make amends with your deity before you can actually do anything about it.
Ooh.
So it's interesting.
I
Savage
definitely
in
want
the
to play
best way.
Shadow Dark. Yeah, I've
Mhm.
heard so many great things, and it just sounds like it's a very like grittier kind of dungeon crawl type of game, and I would just love to just
It
experience.
is so
that.
straightforward and so much fun to play with.
That's
Honestly,
what I've heard. Yeah. Yeah.
Not unlike Morkborg. Very pick up and play styles. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, because Morkborg is like you prepare to die. Like your character is going to die like 90% of the time, right? And I feel like Shadow Dark also has that same kind of vibe. Maybe not to that extreme, but it's definitely easier for your character to die than something
Mhm.
like
Oh yeah,
like Daggerheart, where it's just like, oh, you can avoid death so many times, right?
Incredibly easy. You have to
Right.
actively work to die,
Yeah.
and so far in Daggerheart,
Yeah.
it has to literally be your story goal.
Yeah. Well, and even then, like if you
Yeah.
keep avoiding death and you mark your last hope from the scar, you can
Mhm.
still elect your character to be like, I'm done adventuring. Like they don't die. It's just like I can't play the character anymore. So like you literally could play characters and they would just never die, So which is fascinating. Like I love the idea like of the death moves from Daggerheart that I'm going to pull it into my D&D games on some level. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to do avoid death because I feel like that's one's the trickier one because of the hope slot economy that Daggerheart has that D&D does not have an equivalent to. I have a couple ideas, but once I figure that out, I'm really going to offer that because I think it's really cool for them to have agency and be able to have options for that, right? So I know a lot of people do going out with the Blaze of Glory in their D&D games. That has existed before where you can do like one final epic thing, you get like a single spell slot back to do that, and then your character just flat out dies, right?
Big proponent for that. Yep.
Right, exactly. And then the risk it all is pretty much death saving throw, so that's probably going to just stay intact. But the avoiding death part, that's the one that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But I think it would be a lot of fun to give people options on how they might want to do that because I know, especially when you're telling a story, that if you've vested so much time with playing the game and creating and planning and all that, like that's the thing is these characters are not just characters for people that you're just playing for 4 hours a week. For some people, this is their investment on a lot of different levels, like mentally,
Mhm.
just a lot of emotional ties to this because they thought a lot about the character. They want things, for the character. I know I'm the same way. Like I come up with backstories that makes things very interesting, that makes me want to play these characters, and it goes beyond those 4 hour session because you start thinking about what you want your character to do or stories that you might want to introduce and talk to your DM about and things like that. So I think having avoid death in D&D, it would be a great option to do because it allows players to have that agency to try to keep continuing on their character and not have their story just end there. Now they could always play that character in another campaign, but I think we also know that it's really hard to find campaigns that you could just play the same character over and over again as well too. So sometimes you want to see that story play out. So giving them that option, I think, is a great option for them. So
that if it ever should come,
we had a guest maybe a couple of months ago, and the way he dealt with situations where someone didn't want their character to die, to bring them back, the player would have to choose some penalty for that character. Like they would lose a feat or lose like some skill point or something like that, but the character would still be there and come back.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about for avoiding death was, something like Hope, like they take a permanent like -2 to one of their abilities. And every time they take it, they have to take a -2 to a different ability. And then once they've done their 6-1, then that character has to be done basically, right? And so you're taking some sort of penalty, which can be significant, may not be significant. I've had some people say like, I originally suggested -3. Some people are like, oh, that's way too harsh. And yeah, right. It's like, I mean, it's a -2, and they can pick at the beginning which one they wanted to go to, and they like have a dump stat, that they're not expecting to do well in anyways. Like they could start off with that, right? But I'm still toying with the idea. I'm getting people's feedback on it, on how you want to do that. But there's always that option of having your character die and then making a side quest at some point to bring that character back, and having that player who lost their character play a temporary, character that they haven't played before, and kind of like want to try that out and kind of see how that goes. And they don't have to come up with like a backstory or anything like that. This is just like, we're going to try to save and resurrect this person, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, exactly. My twin brother is going to come and help raise me.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because going all the way back to your current level of Critical Role. Oh, really? Interesting. Sean, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Chuck, you cannot.
Okay, I can't hear him. It's fine. Just ask your question. I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. I'll see what I can do to figure that out. I did lose my internet for a second there, but I'm back. And anyways, going back to your love of Critical Role, right when I joined, it was around 50 episodes into the campaign 1 that they originally did, for which they actually began with Pathfinder, and then for visibility purposes, when they joined Geek and Sundry before they became their own operation, they switched to Dungeons and Dragons. So a lot of the foundations of Critical Role were built on Pathfinder, and then they converted appropriately. But before the events of the show, so before the events of The Legend of Vox Machina even, Ashley Johnson's character Pike dies, and they hadn't yet fully ascended to the power levels where they had all the spells and rituals necessary to be able to bring people back on a whim. And that's where they were able to craft that telltale situation of, now the quest is find the person who can help you bring them back from the dead. It might not be within the players or the character, well, obviously not the players, but might not be within the character's realm of abilities, but that becomes the ultimate side quest. It's almost like a tribute to that player to see everybody else come together to find a way to bring them back in a way that I've actually seen at my own tables go very well and result in some of the best stories that have been told thereafter. And even the mechanics that Matt had to come up with at some point, because especially with Vox Machina, they got to a power level where death was kind of an inconvenience more than anything else. He instituted the rite of sacrifice with each attempted resurrection, wherein each, like, a character dies, they have a ritual around which whatever their true resurrection, actual resurrection, reincarnation, whatever spell they wanted to cast is, where people can contribute boons to improve the DC for the roll, but the DC does permanently increase by 1 for each character death. That way, death doesn't lose its value, and it's no guarantee that these spells, which do have pretty expensive components at some point or another, will work each and every time. I don't know if that's too harsh even for a bunch of kids at their table, but it's a bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, like, so session 2 of our kids Daggerheart game, I brought in the adversary that Matt used in Age of Umbra because I know my kid was going to love it. That character is a tier 1 character. I don't think it's actually tier 1. I think Matt Mercer was just like, I want to try to kill all these people. Because had I not just like, I'll be honest, like had I not like budget a little bit, like I think it would have been a TPK with this. Now part of it was they were all standing around this guy. None of them were thinking about like, distances, like let me get away and like kind of, spread out a little bit. They were just like all melee. And so that was part of it. But the other one is just like this guy was hitting like crazy. 4 of them went down out of the 6. 4 of them went down. 3 of them, I think, avoided death. My kid decided to risk it all. Failed the roll. So his character died, but he loved it. He was like, that was so great, like he absolutely loved that part. So I asked him after that session, I was like, do you want to play a new character or did you still want to play that same character? He's like, I kind of want to play that same character. I was like, okay, well, I know how we would make it work. And Daggerheart has those new things in the Void, which I usually don't use Void like playtest materials because I had a bad experience playtesting Daggerheart. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to have the kids have the option to see if they want to try out doing like one of the transformation cards that they just released. And so before we started our campaign, I asked them if they wanted to do transformations, and if so, which ones they wanted to do. And my kid wanted to do the werewolf option. So we just said, at the next session, we'll just say that you actually didn't die, but you end up transforming to a werewolf, but no one will know until the next time you like mark a hit point, So it's really fascinating just in terms of how people can react to characters' death. Like some people like really embrace it, but I love that. I haven't heard of the ritual of sacrifice. I love that idea of having that in there, and I'm going to have to check that out a little bit because I love like the actions that you take has a consequence that does affect something else that's happening. Like I've just read The Last Owlbear actually, which is an adventure from Mage Hand Press, and they have something in there called Threat DC. That is a DC that is set for later on in the chapter, but it's all based on how well you do with setting up the trap to try to capture the last owlbear. And if you succeed, then the DC stays the same, but if you fail, it increases. And I absolutely love that idea of like how that actually affects something that happens in the game instead of it like seemingly being arbitrarily not connected at all, but that you could show impacted the DC at that point. So I love that. I'm going to have to check out that ritual sacrifice. I think I would love that idea.
It becomes a bonding moment. It's a macabre bonding moment, but it's a pretty great one. And something you just spoke to harkened to another thing that I saw that was absolutely wonderful. It was on Instagram. I can't recall the handle, but it was somebody who said, hey, there's an easy way to adjust DC for any creature, and player actions can actually absolutely make an effect on this. If you want to on the fly reward somebody for having done a critical hit, there are in the DMG massive damage rules or permanent injury rules, but as opposed to memorizing that block or having it screenshotted and readily available or pausing to look it up, if you want to keep the action going, you can reduce the overall AC by 1 or 2. You can reduce the overall number of attacks if it's a creature with multiple attacks by 1, or you can, if it's multiple damage die, you reduce. And in a similar fashion, if circumstances on the battlefield come into play that may embolden the creature, adjusting CR by 1 to 2 points works in the exact opposite direction, where all of a sudden the AC improves by 2. That's an additional CR. If the number of attacks increases by 1, additional CR. Same thing. So if a player is very creative and they're able to I threw the net on the enemy, but it's obviously a powerful enough enemy that normally a net's not going to slow this guy down, but you don't want to balk at the player decision, which is especially important with playing with kids. All of a sudden it's because of that net, the AC is reduced by this much, and because it's grappled by the net, everybody has advantage on it until it's able to break free, or something similar, you pushed the lava monster into the volcano, well, now it has all these benefits going on, these statistical bumps, and that's one of my favorite versions of homebrew, is rewarding or playfully punishing player decisions in that way.
I honestly love that, actually, because how many times have we ran a game and somebody's like, I want to try to cut this guy's arm off, and you're like, in the rules there's nothing that really says anything about that, but what you just described about if they hit them hard enough and you want to reward them by lowering the AC, the armor class, then narratively that gives you to be they're a little bit easier hit now because you hit them so hard that their arm did fall off, right? like that is a great way to narratively describe and make the mechanics affect that.
Oh yeah.
I think I might have to do that. I might have to look into that a little bit more and adapt that, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. It makes things interesting. Because you can do a critical hit if they do that, then you can describe that. Or like if they maybe like if they went like 10 over the AC, like that's a huge hit, right? Like how many times have we went, oh yeah, I rolled like a ridiculous 29 and the damage is still, a D6 with the
Yeah.
arrow, right?
Well,
But
that's why I like massive damage too, because massive damage can be interpreted as a phenomenally successful attack, but it can also be interpreted as having succeeded at dealing half of the maximum or present amount of health points in a single hit.
yeah,
It's just like uh, we want to help these players feel heroic. Here are means by which you can do it,
right.
and in ways that are fair to the rest of the table, because you can adjudicate it in a fairly similar manner as long as you maintain certain baselines. Like the same can be true for magic attacks, for physical attacks. One of the most popular homebrews at my table, because like let's say you roll a fireball, well, you don't roll a fireball; they roll to stop you from fireballing them.
Right.
But to that end, like you can't critically succeed or you can't critically fail with reference to your like fireball roll. Because they're the ones making the saving throw. So the
Right.
homebrew at my table is, well, if they roll a natural one, that's going to be a critical failure on their part. They're taking double that fireball damage. And in a
Right.
similar fashion, the only means by which a saving throw at my table means you don't take any damage on a save or suck spell is if you get that critical success. So these rules are absolutely guidelines, and as long
Right.
as you get buy-in from the table, like flubbing them, changing them, or altering them in these ways, usually
Yes.
results in there being a lot of fun. As long as it's well, surprises can be good here and there, but as long as it's not like an unfair surprise, there's usually a lot of enjoyment by changing it up, especially for
Yeah.
people who've been playing for a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's some homebrew rules that I've actually put into my games that my players have really enjoyed as well too. So the biggest thing is like the posting as a bonus action, all that. But with 2024 rules that we switched over to, that is hardcore or hard coded rule that they have now. But there's some other ones in there that similar to the saving throw. I think I put in there. If somebody rolls a natural 20, then they don't take any damage, to kind of give them that sort of reward of that nat 20. I don't think I put the nat 1 in there, and I think it's just more of I don't want it to happen to my players and then they take double damage and I roll a bunch of damage on that, right? So I think I kind of capped it at like, let's reward the nat 20, but I'm not going to put the nat 1 in there because whatever happens to the players can happen to the monsters, right? And
Yeah.
so but yeah, you're right on those, that I have these conversations with my players to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I try to do this in session 0, but as the game progresses and you kind of see what's been happening, I will suggest to my players to say, hey, what if, this is what happened. What if we just did this instead? Or when this situation come up, like, how do we handle that? Right. So yeah, having that conversation instead of just deciding ultimate, like, being the single deciding factor, I think just goes a long way, because then you get everyone's buy-in and everyone can kind of voice like either concern or agreement. And because you get a lot further when you have a group buy-in,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to this is the hard rule and take it or leave it type of thing, right?
And think about it
And
this way too. You have obviously you have your adult group, and you possibly have more than one group of adults that you play with. But you commonly game master for kids, and in the act of being the game master for them, you're setting the example for how they'll likely be game masters one day too. So, I unfortunately, as I came into the sport, if you want to call it a sport,
it's a
um,
sport.
it really can be.
Yeah.
But I learned, unfortunately, the hard way that the stereotype of I'm the overlord and my word goes game master is unfortunately not uncommon and can be very gatekeeping for the hobby. As a matter of fact, I
Yeah.
have people who play for me who swore off of playing entirely until they found their way to my table, just because they had too many instances where no was the
Yeah.
satisfactory answer only from the game master's perspective.
Mm.
So one of the reasons why I think Daggerheart is taking off the way that it is, and why I love everything that it has to do right now, even
Yeah.
without a published campaign for you to run, is it truly does give agency to create the story, the environment, what's happening to every player at the table, even if the storyteller is still driving the primary events.
Right.
It's wonderfully collaborative, which is how I think the game should be. Unless, of course, once again, you're playing Shadow Dark or Morkboard. Those
Right.
are meant to be meat grinders, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've told people that Daggerheart, I think, is a prime candidate for if somebody wants to learn how to be a game master or dungeon master, start with Daggerheart because it has such a wonderful approach of looking at, the mechanics and being more forgiving about the mechanics because they have like not as many interactions with things as you do with D&D and all that. So it's really good for someone to just kind of get their feet wet of understanding how some of those interactions do work. So that way, when you scale up, you have a better handle on that. But also the idea of collaborative storytelling um, and working together and that you're all part of this group, like just the approach that it takes with being a game master, like being fans of your players and cheering them on and making sure that they're having a wonderful experience with the story that they're going and all that. Daggerheart is designed for that sort of thing. And again, it's not going to be for everybody. And I totally get that. And I don't think any RPG is for everybody, but I do think that if anybody wants to try out being a game master, Daggerheart is the game to go with because it's very forgiving. It encourages you to work with your players and to tell that story collaboratively. It's not mechanics light, but the mechanics are foundational enough to kind of give you enough crunch, but not overwhelming when you're trying to figure out some stuff, right? So I think it's
Mechanically
a
flexible.
wonderful system for that reason. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
I kind of like the Essence 20 because it's very similar in that kind of feel, that domain of like it's rules light, or there's definitely some mechanics in there, but it's not as
Right.
not as heavy on that. I don't know if you've ever played any of those because I run a Power Ranger game every other week, so
Oh, that's so cool.
it's easy
I've
enough
been
to
wanting
pick
to
up.
play
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
it's great. It's fantastic.
That's what I've heard. That and Marvel.
Uh,
Like surprisingly, I've been hearing those two RPGs are fantastic. I'm like, that surprised me, but I definitely want to do it now.
yeah. Um, Before we go on, I do want to say we've reached that hour mark, so
Okay.
we are essentially now in happy hour.
Sweet.
So any of our guests or any of our viewers that are out there, if you guys have any questions you want to ask me or Sam or Sean, our guest, go ahead and put them in chat. This is like the next 15 to 30 minutes, and we'll close up about that time. But until then, if you got questions, post them in chat. We got a couple of questions to keep it going in the meantime, but that's just where we're at. So let
Definitely.
happy hour begin. So I do have one question in particular that I've asked every single one of our guests since
Yeah.
I've been helping out. What has been like one of your highest highs, and what's been one of your lowest lows as a DM lately?
Oh, my highest high. If anybody's in my Lost Mine of Fandelver game, um, dip out now. Not my friend's table, but my other table. Dip out now because I think this is. There's so many from a DM perspective, or from a DM and from a player perspective, that it's hard for me to choose one. But this is the most recent one that was just like this made me feel good as a DM when this happened.
Sure.
So for that high, this goes back to when I added a character token to Stonehill Inn of this dark stranger that was not supposed to be like anyone like of interest, and it became a whole thing with this party where some of them are suspicious of him. One of the characters ended up sleeping with him. It's okay. It's funny. I was not expecting this to happen, but everybody in the party, like when they showed up to to the tavern, like one of the guys, like first thing they did was like, "I'm gonna go hit on that barmaid," and so it became a whole like everybody's starting to sleep with everybody, and the the barbarian of the group said that she was going to hit on the barmaid as well, and I was like, okay, so how do you flirt with her? And she goes up and says, hey, do you want to play Pictionary? Like, I was just like, all right, like roll a persuasion check, and she nailed it. So I was like, we're going to make this happen. But the Dark Stranger was something that became a whole thing with the party. I eventually made the character, leave the next day and say that, he might be back, he might not, he doesn't know, and everything. And he was kind of out of the limelight for a while. Well, when the party eventually got to Cragmaw Castle to try to save Gundren, they see the Dark Stranger there, like, what's the word I'm looking for? That's conspiring with King Grawl, the Bugbear.
Mm-hmm.
And I left the session where the dwarf fighter walks in, and I tell him, like, he sees this hobgoblin, he sees his cousin Gundren that's unconscious on the floor, he sees this huge bugbear, and then you see someone in a dark cloak turns around, and then I made the token visible, and I didn't say anything, and everybody erupted. They're like, "Oh my god!" And the one guy was just like, "I knew he was shady. I knew it the whole time." One of my other players said, "We should have slept with all those people of Phandalin." It was just mad chaos. Like I loved it because it was just phenomenal of a reaction. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next session, they find out that it wasn't actually him; it was a doppelganger. And so that was
Ooh.
like a whole nother twist to that as well too. And like they just kept talking about it through text messages. So it was just so much fun to see that happen with them. And again, this was not in the adventure. This is something that came up that ended up being a whole thing. And now I think it's been like one of the most memorable moments for this table, Um,
That's awesome.
my lowest, I think I was running a game at a convention, and God, it's so hard running RPGs at a convention with people that don't know each other, and you don't know how people are going to be, and you'll get some people that are kind of problematic. I don't think they are trying to be, but they don't know some of the social cues or know how to like play with people that they don't know.
Right.
Um, I had a situation where the party was trying to stop the spy. One of them wanted to kill them. The other one was trying to like not kill them to try to interrogate them. I've never had that sort of thing happen before. And what ended up happening was the guy that wanted to, attack him and kill him, like rolled a nat 20. And so I was about to tell him, like, how he kills this guy, but then I had somebody like kind of jump in. It's like, no, we got to like save him and all that. And like the majority of the table also said, like, oh yeah, we wanted to try to interrogate him. So like I just kind of panic in the moment. It's like, okay, like maybe you can spend the reaction to see if you like, push him out of the way or something like that. I just felt horrible after that because I think the guy was like kind of upset that his critical didn't land necessarily, right? Um, and he knocked him out. Like he definitely took him out, but he didn't kill him because I didn't want to take that part away. So that hit still like impacted him, but he just didn't kill him. But I think he wasn't like happy in that moment. By the end of the game, we were chatting and he seemed like he said he enjoyed the game and all that, but in that moment, I think I robbed him of that, and I didn't mean to. I was just wasn't sure. That was the first time I had that situation pop up, and I wasn't sure how to handle that sort of thing because then it's if you let that crit happen and you have the table that didn't want that to happen, like do you have a mutiny on your hands where they're now at odds with each other? Like I was trying to avoid that, but it's just hard in those situations. So running RPGs at a convention when you don't know who's going to show up, like it is so a terrible experience for me. I have fun, but it's also the most stressful experience as well too because I had some great tables and there were some tables I was just like, I can't wait for these 4 hours to be over because this is tough, So
Right.
yeah,
That's not the shape of it.
yeah. So I would still do it. I just wouldn't do. I would do more like I would want to do like more like the learn to plays, which is a little bit less stressful. Some of these events are like ones that are not like some of them are like adventure leagues or something similar to that. So it
Mhm.
kind of impacts their characters like to other adventures. And it's very stressful to try to remember all those things of what is supposed to happen and what they're supposed to get and all that. It's just a very stressful experience when you're doing something at that level of a league event experience versus running a one shot that is probably a lot more manageable in my opinion
Mhm.
because it's like after that ends like that's it type of thing. So if you have some weird moments, you have some weird moments but you can still kind of resurrect that. But with something like this, where what they do matters in the next adventure that they play, it's very stressful as a DM to try to be on top of that. So I think learn to play is the way I'm going to go in the future instead of those kinds of events.
I don't blame you. Yeah,
Okay.
those are tricky.
We,
Yeah.
we do have a question in the chat already, though.
Nice.
And that's for Sam. Have you
we go.
finished reading any of the Lord of the Rings books?
Oh, here we go.
I have a feeling.
Well, last time I had a check-in with this over on the Crit One and Done Crit Talk podcast. I had read The Hobbit something like 50 times in my life. I've read The Fellowship of the Ring about 5.5 times, and then I get to about the 1/3 point in the Two Towers, and for a variety of reasons. Yeah, I know it's you. I get to about the 1/3 point in the Two Towers, and something comes up in my life wherein I just can't actually finish it. So unfortunately,
Gotcha.
it's still the truth of the matter where I have yet to finish the Two Towers, which means I have not read The Return of the King, nor have I gotten around to the Silmarillion, because that's just a bear of a book. But I infamously, which I don't mean in an evil fashion, but not famously, but semi-well known, am dating a lore expert for all of Tolkien's works, not just the Lord of the Rings. So, by way of the movies and by way of just her speaking to me for the last 6 years, I know enough about the books to be able to speak on matters that happen within them. But I remember being on the Crit Talk episode, or the very first Crit Talk episode, and they were just kind of like, "So where was Gondor when the Westfold fell?" And I went, "No, I don't know." And that's going to haunt me until I actually get around to finishing the Two Towers, because that, my friends, is where they discuss that.
Right.
So thanks for bringing that back up. Tom Bombadil is a little bit of a trip, Billy Berserker. I do love that I was able to get Fellowship of the Ring in before the movies initially came out, and I guess I would have been about 9 or 10 when Fellowship of the Ring and the movie came out. That does place me as a 34-year-old presently, but young me, okay, Tom Bombadil guy is here only for a brief moment. That doesn't make any sense. Wasn't present in the movies. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Didn't ever think about it. And then as all my friends started reading the books, they were just like, who the hell is this? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's been there the whole time. But because I had that exposure, I was one of the few people who isn't like, wait, Pee Wee Herman's in this? Yeah. Anyway, so there's all that. I know Chuck still has a bit of a hard time hearing me at the moment. Chuck, I'm done.
Go ahead, Sam. I can't hear a damn thing you're saying anyway.
Sam says he's done.
I'm sorry.
No,
my setup just can't handle the stress.
I will be the liaison between you two. How's that?
Oh, thank you so much.
For some reason, I can hear both of you. You can't hear Sam. This is hysterical. Yeah, I'll be the liaison.
It's whatever. Well, okay. So I got another one for you, though, Sean. So in these past couple of years that you've been doing this, what kind of tips and tricks have you picked up that you want to share with anybody?
As a dungeon master or as a player, or both?
Go for both. I'll take both.
Go for both. Yeah. I think as one of the things that I have learned, and I will say that I appreciate the new Dungeon Master guide putting this in there, because I think this really helped reaffirm some things for me, is that everybody have different reasons and different styles of how they want to play Dungeons and Dragons or RPGs. And they're not inherently wrong or bad or anything like that. There's some exceptions, right? Obviously you don't want a character to be like a main character where the spotlight is always on them, or they kind of interject themselves into the scenes and all that. But this is more of some people just love to do the action and they don't want to do the role play. Some people love the role play, but the combat, they're just like, yeah, I attack with the longsword. Oh, I rolled a 15, right? And the DMG comes with like different reasons and motivations that people play. and talks about how those are all good reasons, and you just work with and lean into those reasons that they're playing and adapt to that, right? So
Mhm.
I think that has been something that I really appreciate thinking about, that the way I play D&D is not how everybody plays D&D, and I shouldn't expect them to play the same way, because I think when I first started playing D&D, I kind of had that expectation of this is how people should be playing it, not like gatekeeping or anything like that, but like people played in a way that I didn't enjoy it, and I think for the
Right.
longest time I didn't realize this, but it was like I thought that was a bad way of playing, but really it's just how they want to play, and really it's not bad. So it's more of like I had to do a lot of like self-inflection to think about how do I adapt to that to allow them to keep playing and enjoy that game without it making myself miserable, because that was really on me. It wasn't on them at all, but it was really on me. And so a lot of that was finding how I need to be mindful of those things and to make it enjoyable for myself and allow other people to enjoy what they do enjoy about D&D or role-playing games in their own way as well too. Again, with certain rules or certain lines in stone there, with not being a main character, and sometimes people don't realize that. I don't think people are intending it to be. I think sometimes they just need to be pointed out that, hey, like at my kids table, I have a kid who like gets really excited, enthusiastic about stuff, but there's been a couple of times where, the spotlight was on somebody and they were going to like share something about their character, and they kind of like interject like, "Oh, this is like blah blah blah," and it inadvertently like stole that spotlight from them, and that having that moment. It wasn't on purpose. It wasn't intentional, and I think that's something that I had to be mindful of. Is like people have different styles. People, if there's something that they're doing, they may not realize that, and sometimes just having a conversation, right? I think in this day and age, it's very hard to do some of these things, like the hard things, because people don't like confrontation. I don't like confrontation. Hell, I don't want to be in a position where people like report to me, because like I don't want to deal with that shit. Like I'm like I am not going any higher in my career because I do not want people reporting to me, because I just know that's not something I enjoy and everything. And so confrontations are hard, but I think if you come across as not confronting, but having a conversation of like, hey, this is how I feel in these moments and stuff like that, I think that goes a long way. And so I think role playing games allows those opportunities to really go beyond just playing at a table, but how that can improve some of our interpersonal social communication styles as well too, as long as we're comfortable with it. They're just people who are not comfortable with confrontations or any intense moments or awkward moments, things like that, because sometimes it does get awkward at the beginning if you have to have those conversations. But I'm really surprised at when I talk to people about things, like how open minded they are about that. And so now, again, I've only been in the space for 2 years, so I haven't had the horror stories I've heard from people, because I probably haven't had their same level of experiences. But I think we're coming around to where if we know how to talk to people about these things, like it can go a long way. Um,
Right.
I'm sorry, that was long winded, but like, long story short, people have different styles, and as long as it's not ruining anyone's fun like intentionally, work with that style, and amp that up, and kind of lean into that. Like my one player that loves the chaos, I kind of give him like chaotic moments to go with. People that love the role play, I give them moments to role play. Like I have a table that loves role playing, so I just said, before you guys take your long rest, you're at the campfire, and we took campfire question cards from the RPG box or whatever, and gave them those questions, and they just had a conversation for like an hour because they love the role playing stuff of it. So learning what your players enjoy and leaning into those to give them those moments to really shine through and enjoy that, I think is a great way to be able to give a memorable experience, a fun experience. And it doesn't matter if you fudge up the rules or anything like that, because people remember the moments, they don't remember the mechanics, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly it. Let's see. We actually have a couple of questions from our
Now that I
audience
talked for
here.
like 10 minutes straight, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like, is this guy done yet? Is that one of the questions?
So Billy Berserker's he's got one. So what's your favorite PC ever as a player and as a GM?
Oh,
Sam's kind of already answered it in the chat, but